Hello, everybody. It is your host, Patricia. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of The Dialogue. You know that our mantra here on our show is that we are healing souls one conversation at a time. And so I want to welcome you. Make sure that you're sharing the content with someone. I hope that this inspires you because we are all on a journey to learn who we are at our core prior to abuse, mistreatment, and so many other perils that take place in our life as we are journeying on our life. So welcome. On today's show, I have been talking about abuse because this month is mental health awareness. And so we are diving deep into the content. We're talking about abuse, mental, physical, emotional. We're talking about all these issues because we want you to understand that you do not identify with the abuse, that you have an identity that oftentimes is covered up because of all the things that have taken place in your life. And we don't want you to live out of the form of your abuse. We want you to live from your purpose and your authentic identity, which is discovered after healing. So it is healing, then you learn your identity, and then you can pursue purpose. So let's get straight into the content. As I said, today's title for this episode is Identity and Impact, okay? And so for this specific episode is with the purpose in mind to help you become the full developed person that you were always created to be, embrace who you were called to be prior to being abused. So identity can be defined as who you are at the core, which is consistent with your character, your personality, beliefs, values, mental and emotional development, all make up who you are at the core. Unfortunately, when you are abused, used improperly, what happens is that you take on the identity that is placed upon you. If you have been raped, maybe you are acting out of promiscuity or a lot of perversion. That goes for any type of sexual abuse. If you have been beaten on physically, if you have been emotionally or mentally abused, this affects who you are at your core because it affects what you believe about yourself, your outlook on circumstances and situations, your perspective of people, who you can trust or who you can't, how you connect with people, the relationships that you're able to keep or lose. It affects everything when you are abused. And so your identity oftentimes is skewed because of the experience that you have encountered. Oftentimes, we see so many issues that go into what I would like to call an identity crisis. And I'll give you an example of it. Say a man is 40 or 50 years old. He goes out, he buys everything that consists of being a young man. He buys the motorcycle, he gets the hot girlfriend that's in her 20s or 30s. He starts wearing his hair a different way that doesn't necessarily compliment him because he's older. And he's just showing signs of what somebody might believe to be undeveloped. He's not developed. And then he may sit down and say, hey, this is not really who I am. I want something different. I want to be something different. But up until that point, he didn't really know who he was. And this does not just happen with men. It also happens with women. Anybody can go through what we would call an identity crisis. And oftentimes it happens when you have been abused. As you grow and develop, we all know that they say that women mature faster than men. I personally believe that maturity is more of a component of how you can put in proper perspective the things that have taken place in your life, and then how you're able to navigate and behave and think and speak outside of those circumstances. Meaning those circumstances don't define you, okay? And so when we deal with the aspect of identity, there are many things and conditions and behaviors that are affected in a person when they go through an identity crisis. For one, people that are traumatized, that go through abuse, they have a mental disposition, which is their mentality, their mind. It can often look in the form or come out in the form of exhaustion, confusion, sadness, anxiety, agitation, numbness, disassociation, physical arousal, and blunted affect. And when it says affect, it's talking about a person's countenance, the way that they look. You ever just look at someone, they just look like blah, like whatever, they don't care. These are the components of someone that has endured abuse, but it is coming out. So that which is lying within the core is now manifesting in their physical countenance, on their face, and or their mentality. And then you go into the physical condition of people that have been traumatized, because it also does show up physically. Not only physically in your body, it can also show up in the aspect of your health. Deterioration in your bones, deterioration in your muscles. You have aches and pains. Your face is wrinkled. You have drooping skin. Sometimes trauma can interfere with your sight, your ability to smell, speech, and breathing. You ever see someone that has been traumatized and something triggers them, and all of a sudden they're breathing hard, they're anxious, they feel out of place, distorted, and they're not able to function properly? Trauma affects so many different areas in your life. However, people just get accustomed to the area of trauma and they're so used to it that it's familiar. They don't start to think or believe that anything else is wrong because this is what they're used to. Especially if you are someone that has been traumatized since childhood. Your disposition, how you feel about life and people, is highly affected from things that take place in your childhood. Especially from being a child, a lot of times we're growing up in the world, learning how to navigate, process our emotions, how we think about things and feel. And when you're traumatized and abused as a child, imagine growing up with this skewed, distorted perception of people, circumstances, crowds, groups of people. All of this is affected. When you are traumatized, your identity is also traumatized. It also states that one's outlook of themselves, how you feel about yourself, is also negatively impacted. Individuals that have been traumatized and it affects their identity oftentimes have issues with low self-worth, extremely low self-esteem. Oftentimes they feel as though if something bad happens, they're the cause of it. They're not liked or loved. They're also tormented by thoughts that reflect negative core, like their core of who they are, and their beliefs about themselves, which can include. And these are phrases that someone who has a negative outlook on themselves may say to themselves. I will never be able to feel normal emotions again. Because trauma does jar your emotions. It causes what I call an emotional traffic jam. 1 minute you're sad, you're happy, then you're angry, then you're having outbursts. It can be all at one time. Certain people feel like an object, not like a person, meaning that they can feel used, misused, only utilized for the good of other people. And they can also feel as though their identity is completely stripped, as though they don't even know themselves anymore. So many of you know that abuse can occur at any interval in your life at any time. It does not have to be that you're 40 or 50. You can be abused in your 20s, while you're a teenager, while you're a child, in your adolescent stages. But ultimately, the purpose of this podcast is to bring to the forefront how identity crisis takes place from trauma and pain and abuse, help you get a better perspective of your identity so we can next talk about impact. When you are abused, even if no one else sees it and is affected by it, it does go into causing issues in your work relationships and your ability to hope for a better future. We know that oftentimes when we set goals and have desires and things in our life, if you can't get a wonderful glimpse of the future or seeing yourself differently, oftentimes this affects change, transformation, and also your ability to be a different person. In people that are traumatized that also have identity issues, you will find brokenness, lack of self-confidence, insecurities, anger issues, resulting from childhood trauma. It can be unforgiveness, and the list goes on and on. Until you heal from the root of the issue, you will never be able to grow or become fully developed. And that is where we are trying to get you as an individual too. Not being fragmented in your emotions, not second guessing yourself when you have a decision to make, not feeling as though you are in shambles or pieces, but that you are whole. These wonderful benefits and qualities come after you are healed and discover your identity is separate from what happened to you or took place in your life, that is separate from what someone has said about you, separate from what people think about you, the gossip, the negative narratives people have painted about you, and other people's opinions. If I can be honest with you, many people endure identity crisis in their life. It can come from having to abruptly change or move. When you go to college, you might have an identity crisis where you were with a certain genre of people and now you're with totally different people. You can have an identity crisis if you're older, you're a parent, your children were in the home, and then when they leave, you don't know what to do, you don't know who you are. Identity crisis can happen when you become a mother and you're used to having a certain schedule and then everything is just out of whack all the time because you're chasing this toddler around. Identity crisis is not a foreign concept. But when it comes from abuse, it's a little bit different because now you're dealing with pain that has been placed on you and maybe not expected. Most parents know when their children get older, they're going to leave the house, they're going to go off and do something wonderful or great. When it comes from a place of pain, it is not the same narrative. When pain is the threshing foundational floor for identity, it is never healthy. Because you will always attract people that are full of pain. And then you bond with that person. It's called trauma bonding. And that only leads to a miserable relationship or companionship or friendship. When the foundation of a person's life is pain, their identity is always going to be skewed. They will not have a proper perspective of who they are. And ultimately, people will come in and you can sometimes see trauma on people. And when they bond and connect with that person, they can't see them past the pain. And so this prohibits development. It prohibits maturity. It prohibits so many different areas from being fully developed. And when it's not fully developed, it creates an issue where life is not lived to its full maximum potential or enjoyment. Ultimately, the pain impacts you, and if you talk from a place of pain or operate from a place of pain or have a job from a place of pain, it negatively impacts your impact and the impact that you have on other people and your sphere of influence. Healing is the route that you want to pursue, no matter how long it takes you, no matter how difficult it is. Healing brings you into a place of, this happened to me. I may not have the answer of why it happened to me or justification as to why it happens to me, but I need to heal. And healing is when you come to a place of peace about what happened to you. And that means that you don't have a reaction, a negative reaction towards it, but you can use it to do something good with it. And that is a healthy place to impact other people with. When you're healed, you become whole and fully developed, and your mind, will, and emotions, and then you're able to be used on a larger scale of influence to impact other people. So, I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode. My prayer is that something that was said on this empowered you and enlightened you to understand that if you have endured any type of trauma in your life, you are going to want to go on a journey towards healing, to be able to see the different areas in your life that have been impacted, your emotions, your mental, how you process, your perspective, your outlook on people and yourself will change once you go through the process of healing. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I want you guys to know that there is content available for you. If you follow me on Instagram, and you more than likely would love to, I am at Patricia Tomlinson _. In my Linktree bio on Instagram, there is a free PTSD test that's post-traumatic stress disorder that will show you if you are someone that has been traumatized. There is also a ACE free questionnaire that you can take that stands for Adverse Childhood Experience, meaning it will show you your score if you are someone that has been severely impacted by things that have gone on in your life. There are other new and upcoming things and resources becoming available for you. I am working diligently to make sure that these things become available for those who have been impacted by rape, molestation, trauma, abuse, who want to know their authentic identity. And when I say authentic, I am not referring to the identity people have used or put on you that is convenient for them, but the identity that is best for you. And we'll also talk more about purpose. These resources shall be up and coming really soon. You want to stay tuned. You can also follow me on TikTok at The Dialogue 2. I also have a free podcast, which you're listening to now, that you can share with other people. And stay tuned. We have more things becoming available for you so that you can live your maximum life, embrace your potential, and enjoy this life while you're here. As you know, our mantra is that we're healing souls one conversation at a time. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more content, and I hope you enjoy the day. Bye, guys.